Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Mem. Daf Mem in Sota. Learn for Fushlim for Lozer ben Reuma. Today's daf will start at about halfway down the page, a little bit past there, almost even with the Tosas Dibri Maskul Shema, where we left off yesterday, a line above that. The Rabbah of Rabbah, period. Rabba Vuv Rav Chia. Right in the middle of the line there, right above the word Shema in Tosfos. Rabbi Vu, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, these two rabbis, they visited a city. Rabbi Vu darsh by Garata, Rabbi Vu darshan by Garata, stories, narratives, interesting topics. Rabbi Chia bar Abba darsh b'shmaita. He darshan halachas. He gave a drush about halachos, hilchos din, isser, taros, things of that sort. Things that are very dry and let's call it less interesting, less. It's not so easy on the ear. Shavku koyama, Rav Chia bar Abba. They all left Rav Chia bar Abba, who is darshning halachas. People like to hear stories, so they went to Rav Vu to hear his agarata because they didn't want to listen to halacha. They preferred to listen to agarata. Halashtaito, he felt bad. He was upset that people left his shiur, giving a shiur halacha. Amalei. So Rav Abba. Rabbi Vu was trying to pacify Rav Chia bar Abba, who had darshan halachas and felt bad now that everybody left him. I guess when they took a break for lunch, wherever, he told them, I'll give you an example. What's this comparable to? The two people, one is selling precious stones, and one guy selling needles, threads, little things that women deal with, little utensils. Ami Kofson, what's going to have a bigger demand? Where's it going to be a bigger demand? I guess the guy who sells small things that's more affordable, that's going to have a bigger demand. And more people are going to be visiting that store than the store of the precious stones. Not everybody has money for that. So the same thing. You're really selling precious stones, so you have less people there, but what you're selling is more precious. Still, that he wasn't pacified. Every day, Rav Chia bar Abba at the end of the shiur would accompany Rav Vu to his lodging because Rav Vu was known to be close to the king, and they gave him respect because of that. So he would accompany Rav Vu to his door. At that point, when Rav Chia bar Abba felt very bad, so Rav Vu went out of his way to accompany Rav Chia bar Abba to his dwelling so that he shouldn't feel bad. Even though Rav Vu was close to the king and he was one who was usually, they accompanied him to his door. But here Rav Vu accompanied Rav Chia bar Abba to his lodging. Even though Rav Vu gave him this honor and pacified him with the story about, people, you have less people, but what you're selling is much more precious. Still, still he wasn't pacified. He wasn't pacified by this because he still felt bad that he had less attention. The rabbis still want a big crowd when they're speaking. Back to our issue of we're talking about the Shliach Tzibur, how he davens and how the Birkas Kohanim is done, and how we said yesterday they can't both trample upon one another with words. In other words, you don't answer Amen until you hear the whole bracha. The Kohanim don't start duchening until they heard the Amen from the Tzibur. By the way, we mentioned yesterday, I think that none of this is what we do today. That the Shliach Tzibur says word by word. Before that's not, the Gemara doesn't seem to address that. It's mashma that either they didn't do that, or they did it, but the Kohanim began. Maybe they didn't know how to begin Yivarechecha, and then they followed up. By the way, I always, I don't know if it's brought down in the Gemara, but I remember an old man here was a Talmud of Cook, used to daven here many, many years ago with a shtreimel, I think before any of you were part of this community, and he would go over and tell the Shliach Tzibur. Sometimes you see the Shliach Tzibur says, he thinks he's just supposed to lead the Kohanim, say, should he Yivarechecha, or like in case they forgot, in case they forgot the words, like just reminding you. No, that's not the way. It's Amor Lahem. You should tell them, even though Amor Lahem means that the Kohen, right? Tell them Amor Lahem. Kohanim, this is what you should say it out loud. Yivarechecha. It's not because they forgot and you're just whispering to them because they forgot. Pardon? Yeah.
Say that loud.
Say.
He used to rebuke the Shliach Tzibor
For not saying it out loud. Yeah, so
loud.
I'm telling you, where did he get it from? Where did he get it from? Either from me or from that old man who told us all that. He was the father-in-law of a fellow Blau. If you remember, there was a fellow Blauer in the neighborhood. He was a member that he died right after Pesach when they, he was joking that his wife wanted him to help clean up. Whatever. He had a heart attack that night. Not a very nice man. He was he lived over here on Yehuda Carney over there and up the steps. Anyway, this old Talmud of Rav Kook would visit him often because he was his father-in-law. Anyway, he enlightened us on that issue. Anyway, back when the Shliach Tzibor, before we get to Birkas Kohanim, says Ritzei and Amachsu Shloch, and then he says Modem. So we say, the Gemara says like this, Bisman, with the first of the wide lines in the Gemara, Bisman Shliach Tzibor Amar Modem Ha'amayim, what did the people say? Amar Rav, so Rav said like this, Modem Anachnu L'cha, Hashem L'keinu, this is what we call Modem Rabbanan, which we all say, Modem Anachnu L'cha, Hashem L'keinu, Al Sha'anu Modem Lach. We thank you because we Al Sha'anu Modem Lach, Al Sha'nat Sata Rash, Al Sha'sati Beinu, Leos T'vukam B'cha U'Modem Lach. We thank you because you've given us the opportunity to be close to you. We thank you for giving us this opportunity. That's what Rav says. Shmuel adds on. Shmuel Omer Elokei Chol Basar, the God of all humans. Al Shanachnu Modim Lach, that we thank you for. Right? Elokei Chol Basar Yotzein Sebreshis. Yes. Rav Samoy Omer Yotzein Sebreshis. He adds this on. Here Rashi points out Mosifu, and as all these rabbis are adding on another few words to this bracha. The first one said Baruch Hashem L'keinu Al Shanachnu Modem Lach. Al Shanachnu really we say at the Al Shanachnu he splits up. We have really say it at the end. Hashem L'keinu L'chei Chol Basar Al Shanachnu Modem Lach. Rav Samoy says Yotzein Ze'Bereshis Al Shanachnu Modem Lach. All these end off of Al Shanachnu Modem Lach, which we end off with. Nardoi Amri, they add on Mishmeid Rav Samoy, Brachas Vados Hashem Pagadol, blessings and thanksgivings for your great name Al Shechisan, because you've caused us to live. You've made us live. B'kiyam Tanu, you've established Al Shanachnu Modem Lach. Again, most of these end off Al Shanachnu Lach. V'achar B'Yaakov Messiah Ba Hachi Kein Chayenu, so you should cause us to live. Uschanenu, and grace us. V'tikapsenu, and gather us. V'sasaf Goysen, and gather our exiles. To the courts of your holy courts, lishmor chukecha, to observe your ordinances, lasav sancha, and to do your will, lev of shalom, with a complete heart. Al shanach l'modem. All these end up shanach. Amar Papa. Now Rav Papa is common. He does this in different places in Shas. Rabbi Akiva Eiger points that out on the side. Amar Papa hilkach nemenu l'kulo. Therefore, we say all of these. In other words, since we have different rabbis adding on different ideas, all of which are good, it will say them all together. Rav Papa and several other places in Shas, where there's a shiloh, a machlokas, is it length or is it the width, and different issues when it comes to Shabbos, when it comes to it's more in Chulin in a couple of places, what's the measurement? He says, therefore, we'll take all of them together. Let's include them all. That's his shita. And that's what we talk about modem. When we say modem every day in davening, in response to the Shliach Tzibur, right, by Shachris, Musaf, Mincha. So we add on modem, we say all these modem. That's why it's called modem drabanan. Why is it called modem drabanan? Not because it's midrabanan, because all these rabbis gave these different opinions, and therefore we added on. There's another beautiful thing I heard her once that somebody from the shul here said that, many times we say, you'll be motzi me. You make a bracha, you'll make kiddush for us, right? You'll bench for us. Make a bracha and be motzi me. When it comes to modim drabanan, nobody says modim, because when it comes to giving thanks, everybody has to give thanks themselves. Not something to be yotze with somebody else. Every person has to give thanks. It's something that we all have to do individually. It's an important idea. That's what the Papa says. Amar Yitzchak. We're 6 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara on them. Amar Yitzchak L'olam Te'emas Tzibur Alecha. every person should always have the fear of the congregation, of the nation upon you. The people, the Kohanim, when they duchen, their face is towards the nation, giving them respect, even though their back is towards God, so to speak, their face is towards the tzibur, because you should always have the fear of the tzibur, and others respect for the tzibur in front of you. He got up on his feet, David HaMelech, that is, and he said, Shimuni achai va'ami, hear me, my brothers and my nation. What does he mean by my brothers? As if to say that if you follow, right, Masir Mayul said, I want you to donate. And he said to them, right, he said to them, the question is, why does he call them my brothers and my nation? If he's my brothers, Lamami, why do you have to call my nation? If they're my nation, Lamach, why call Machai? I'm a blazer. David said to them, if you listen to the rules of the Torah and you donate to the base of Mikdash, then you are my brothers and I respect you. If not, then you are my nation. And I'll rule over you with a stick, meaning then I'll force you. So and Rashi says, if you're complete with God, then then you're my brothers and my colleagues. If they are good, if the people are listening, then he should have respect for them. He can call them my brothers. He doesn't call them, I'm going to rule them no matter what. If you're not going to listen, then I'm going to rule you with the stick. But if you're going to listen, if you listen to what God's laws, then I will treat you like brothers. I'll treat you with great respect. Rabbanan say, how do we know this? Right? And the gears, I think, is the Tan Rabbanan. The Tan Rabbanan. So how do we know this idea that you have to have covered for the tzibur? You have to have the fear of the tzibur and to teach them with great respect. Not only from the fact that the Kohanim stood with their backs to the Shechina and their face to the tzibur, and not only from David HaMelech, because it's the Torah Rabbanan, they're not allowed to duchen. You're not allowed to go with your shoes or sandals when they duchen. They don't go up to the platform again. They don't go up there with their shoes. Again, as we said yesterday, it's not a daraisa. You can't wear shoes. It's rather that it's a takana that Rabbi Yochanan Zaka made. My time, what's the reason why they can't wear shoes? Lav Mishum covered tzibur, isn't it because of covered tzibur? And Rashi explains because when they lift up their hands, their garment will be lifted, and people will see their dirty shoes full of mud, and that's not covered tzibur. So isn't that the reason? Isn't that a source for the idea that you should have the fear of the tzibur, have respect for the tzibur? The fact that you shouldn't wear shoes. Amar Bashi, no, lo hasam shem. There, like we said yesterday, there the reason why you don't wear shoes is shem nifskol retzu b'sandal, because maybe the shoe strap will become torn. Then he'll go back. He'll sit down. He'll go on the side to tie it up. The Amri people will say, why did he go down from the duchen? Ben Gushim and Chalutza. He must be somebody who's unfit for duchening because he's not a proper Kohen, because he's the son of a Grusha or Chalutza, meaning a Kohen who married a Grusha or Chalutza. Grusha is the Raisa, Chalutza is Rabbanan, but he's basically a Halal and he can't duchen. So that's the reason why, not because of Kavod Tzibur. It's nothing to do with Kavod Tzibur. It has to do with the fact that we're afraid that maybe his shoe strap will be torn. He'll go down to fix it, and people will think that he left the duchen in order to avoid duchening because he's not a proper Kohen. That has nothing to do with really, like I said, with Kavod Tzibur. But still, a person should have the fear of the tzibur, as we see from David HaMelech, and as we see from the fact that the Kohanim face the people with their back towards the Shechina. But Mikdash Bracha Achas, and we said when Yivrach Hashem Yishmerecha, the three psukim that the Kohanim say in the Gvul and outside of the base of Mikdash, you answer Amen between each one. Each one's a separate bracha. In the Mikdash, you only say one bracha with no Amen in between. Kolkach Lama, why? Lefisha ain't Amen b'Mikdash, because we don't answer Amen in the Mikdash. In the base of Mikdash, you don't say Amen. Therefore, you just say the three psukim together as one big pasuk. Tan Rabbanim and Ein Shein Amen Mikdash. How do we know that you don't say Amen in Mikdash? Remember, it says, Kumu Baruchu, pasuk in the Chamer. Kumu Baruchu as Hashem Elokechem. Rise up and bless God, your God. Mina olam v'ada olam, from one world to the next. And the pasuk goes on, Vivarchu Shem Kvodecha. And Rashi explains that in the olden days, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, right, the Beis Hamikdash, they didn't say Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avram, Baruch Atah Hashem Mechayim Mason. They said Baruch Atah Hashem, Baruch Atah Hashem. What do they say? Mina Olam Bada Olam. Baruch Hashem. They said Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael, not Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avram, Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael Min Ha'olam Ba'ad Ha'olam for Magen Avraham, and same thing for Chaim Mason. That's how they made the bracha. Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael Min Ha'olam. And then the pasuk goes on, V'Baruch Shem Kvodecha. And Rashi explains, V'Sharom Yanu Baruch Shem Kvodecha. Sha'am Onin Lahalul Hodos. They answer Baruch Shem Kvodecha. In other words, you don't say Amen in the base of Mikdash. You only say Baruch Shem Kvodecha. Okay, why? Because based on this pasuk, Baruch Hashem Elokei Min Ha'olam Ba'ad Ha'olam, that's the bracha. And it ends off with Baruch Hashem Kvodecha, which is Baruch Hashem Kvodecha, which people answer. And then the Gemara goes on, before we'll explain this more, Menayin Sha'al Kol Bracha Tila. How do we know that we say this Tehillah, this praise on each and every bracha, this idea of Baruch Hashem Kvodecha, Shenemar Umaromim Al Kol Bracha Tila. He takes out the Baruch Hashem Kvodecha that really belongs with on the third line, because it's Baruch Hashem Elokei Min Ha'olam Ba'ad Ha'olam, Baruch Hashem Kvodecha. That's how we know you don't answer Amen in the base Mikdash, because of the Baruch Hashem Kvodecha. That's the Baruch Hashem Kvodecha. The Kumu Baruch Hashem Elokei Min Ha'olam Ba'ad Ha'olam, that's the bracha. The answer is Baruch Hashem Kvodecha. Okay, and how do we know you make it on each and every bracha? Shenemar umaromim al kol bracha, and he'll be exalted on each and every bracha. Utihila, he'll be exalted on all blessings and praises. Umaromim, Hashem will be exalted above all blessings and praises. And he darshans al kol bracha tain tila. On each and every bracha, you should give the tila of Baruch Shem Kvodecha. Tosfos asks over here, understand, you say over here that in the base of Mikdash, they said the three psukim, Yevarecha Hashem, Yar Hashem, and Yisa, as one pasuk, because there's no amen in between, because they don't answer them in the base of Mikdash. How do you know you don't answer them in the Mikdash? Because in the base of Mikdash, in place of amen, they say Baruch Shem Kvodecha. Well, that's a bigger hefsek than amen, right? If you say there's no amen between the first and second, between the third and fourth, between the first and second, the second and third psukim, there's no amen there. Therefore, it's one long thing. Not just the opposite. It's even a bigger hefsek. It's not amen. It's just one little word. Baruch Shem Kvodecha is much longer words. So Tosfos explains that other Rishonim also say when they said Baruch Shem Kvodecha, it wasn't at the end of the pasuk. When we say amen, it's at the end. Baruch Hashem Chaim Mason, amen. Baruch Hashem again Avraham, amen. Baruch Hashem wherever it's, we say amen. The Baruch Shem was said when we say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo, at Hashem's name. Baruch Hashem, we say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. That's when they said Baruch Shem Kvodecha. So at the end of the pasuk, they didn't. There was nothing. So you said Baruch Hashem, then people would answer Baruch Shem Kvodecha. Baruch Hashem v'yishmerecha. No, nothing is said then. So v'yishmerecha goes right into Yar Hashem. V'choneka, nothing is said there. Where is this? Where is Baruch Hashem Kvodecha? At the mention of Hashem's name. Baruch Hashem, Yar Hashem, Yisa Hashem. That's when you mention Baruch Hashem Kvodecha. But at the end of the pasuk, nothing is mentioned. But there's no hefsek there. There's no amen.
In the middle of a pasuk?
Yeah, it's hefsek in the middle of the pasuk. Yeah, that's not hefsek. They said it as the Kohanim said it at the same time. At the same time, like we do Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. You know, that's what he said. That's really hefsek. If you're being yotzei with a bracha with somebody, you don't say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo because it's like hefsek. Right? And that was a lot in the base of English. Says the Mishnah. Now we're going back. Actually, the Mishnah that started this para of Elu Nemar and B'Chalosha, the things that are said in any language, like Sota. That's why this is brought down here, because Sota is the first thing that can really be said in the vernacular. It doesn't have to be said in Hebrew, just like Kriya Shema. But then we talk about things, Elu Nemar and B'Chalosha. What has to be said in Lashon HaKodesh? We said Mikra Bigurim, Chalitza, based on Psukkah, Brachas V'Klolos, Brachas V'Klolos on Hargrizim Harevel, Birchas Kohanim, which we've been discussing the last couple of days, Ubirchas Kohen Gadol. The bracha the Kohen Gadol did on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, after he finished the avoda, he said a bracha. Brachas Kohen Gadol Ketzad. What's the bracha of the Kohen Gadol? Brachas Kohen Gadol Ketzad. We're on Mem Amid Beis at the Mishnah. We're beginning the Mishnah on Mem Amid Beis. Brachas Kohen Gadol Ketzad. Chazan Knesses. The Chazan is like the Shamas. He's the Shamas who takes care of the shul. We have one here, but we can't see him. He's like an invisible one. There's an invisible Shamas here. But there's
He's only here when you're not here.
He's only here when I'm not here, right? So this Shamas, the Shamas is the one who takes care of things. He arranges, make sure everything is set up properly. The shul, the Aron Kodesh, everything is put in order. So the Chazan Knesset says, he takes the Sefer Torah, but no the Rosh Knesset. He gives it to the Rosh Knesset. The Rosh Knesset is what we call the Gabbai. You can call it the president, but it's really his function as the Gabbai. He decides who gets the Aliyahs, who should go up to Dapim for the Yomit, etc. So the Shamas takes the Sefer Torah, gives it to the Gabbai. The Gabbai, Rosh Knesset, he gives it to the Skan, the assistant Kohen Gadol, who serves in place of the Kohen Gadol if the Kohen Gadol becomes tamei or incapacitated. Vaskan Nosel Kohen Gadol, and the Skan gives it to the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol Omed, the Kohen Gadol stands up. Now stands up sounds like he was sitting, right? Now he stands up. So the Gemara is going to talk about that. How it wasn't he supposed to be standing the whole time anyway? The Gemara will ask that. Kohen Gadol Omed, he stands up and Makabel, and he he accepts the Sefer Torah, and he reads from the Sefer Torah. What does he read? What do we read? What's the Kriya on Yom Kippur? Achrei Mos. We begin with Achrei Mos. The Korah Achrei Mos, and he also reads Ba'ach Ba'asar in Emor, which is 2 sedras later in the way we have it split up, right? Achrei Mos Ba'ach Ba'asar, which is in the parsha of Shor Kesav Oez. Ba'ach Ba'asar. Begolas Torah. Then he rolls up the Sefer Torah. Umenicha b'chayko, and he puts it in his bosom. In other words, he holds on to it. But Omer, and he says, "Yes, there's a lot more written in here in the Torah than I've read to you, because of Khan." And then he reads off, and what is that? There's a lot more in here. Now, you shouldn't think that I'm missing something, but the reason is because the next parsha he's going to read is which is like what we read for the Maftir, right? That's what we read the parsha of in Pinchas, right? But as we'll see, there's a big jump between Achrei Mos and Ach Ba'asor. There's very little jump, right? You could just roll it real quick between Achrei Mos and Emor. But to roll it all the way till Bamidbar to Pinchas, which is a whole book ahead, that's a long way. So we're not going to roll it in front of the tzibur. That's disrespectful to stand there and roll. So he rolls it up, and the Asher B'Cham Shekudim, Korah Pei reads it Baal Peh. Even though normally the Torah we don't read Baal Peh, here he's allowed to read Baal Peh because Kavarat Tzibur. So he says, he tells him, listen, the reason I'm rolling it up and reading it to you Baal Peh is not that's missing in the Torah. You shouldn't think it's something's missing here, that there's some part of the Torah is defective. No. It's just that I'm rolling it up to save time. And then after he finishes laning, he says the Shemon Esrei, which is really 8 brachas he includes over here. Ala Torah, first is Asher Nasan Lana Torah Semes, like the regular brachas of Torah. Ala Voda, that's what say, Ala Odaya Modim, which we normally have. Machilas Avon, which we say especially on Yom Kippur, which we have in our Machzorim. And then he says also a bracha that we don't have in our Machzorim, Ala Mikdash, Val Yisrael, Val Kohanim. He makes a bracha on the Mikdash, Al Yisrael, Val Kohanim, Val Yerushalayim. In our Gemara, we just read it says Al Yerushalayim. In the Mishnayos, it doesn't have Al Yerushalayim. Mishnayos don't have that. So, but he has these 8 brachas, Bashar Tefillah, and then the rest of the Tefillah. So the way we have it in our Gemara, we have Al Torah is 1 avoda, 2 Adai is 3, Mechilazim is 4, Mikdash is 5, Yisrael is 6, Kohanim is 7, Yerushalayim is 8, and then also the rest of the davening. But we'll see with the rest of the davening, it's like a bracha of Shemei Tefillah. But in the Mishnayos, they don't have Yerushalayim. Shar Tefillah is like is number 8, is the 8th one, and Yerushalayim is not included. Okay, so these are the special things we'll talk about in the Gemara that the Kohen does. So the Kohen lanes the Sefer Torah, and he also reads the parsha of Pinchas Baal Peh, and then he makes all these brachas. Says the Gemara, well, let's go back to the order. What do we say? The Shamas takes the Sefer Torah, gives it to the Gabbai. The Gabbai gives it to the Skan gives it to the Kohen Gadol. Well, there's a famous machlokas. Do you give kavod to a Talmud in front of a Rav? If there's a Rav there, for example, you can't ask a Shiloh. Let's say the rabbi is here. So it's not proper to ask a Shiloh of the Gabbai or some other guy in the shul. You have to ask the rabbi. You don't ask a Shiloh of a Talmud in front of a Rav. But can you give kavod to a Talmud in front of a Rav? Over here you do. Because the Shamas doesn't give it to the Kohen Gadol. He first gives it to the Gabbai. And the Gabbai gives it not to the Kohen Gadol, but to the Skan. Then the Skan finally gives it to the Kohen Gadol. So the Charetz Arayim from over here, Shema Mina Chokim Kabbalah Talmud, you can give honor, respect to a Talmud from Rav, even though the Rav is greater there too. You still give kavod to the Talmud. It's not considered disrespectful to the Rav. Rabbi, no, Kulu Mishum Kvoda to Kohen Gadol. This is all part of the kavod of Kohen Gadol. In other words, as you go up the ladder, by the Shamas giving it to the Gabbai, and the Gabbai giving it to the Skan, that's all covered for the Kohen Gadol. To show that, look, you got to go all the way up the ladder. Not the Shamas is giving it directly to the Kohen Gadol. It's more respectful for the Kohen Gadol to receive it from somebody who's closer to him in stature. So it's greater cover to go up the ladder, to give it first to the Gabbai from the Shamas, then the Gabbai gives it to the Skan, and the Skan gives it to the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol, Omedim Kabul Kar, he stands up and he accepts the Torah. He reads. Omed, he stands up now. Machal Dioshev, he can sit before. V'amar ein yeshiva b'azora el malchei. The only ones allowed to sit in the Azara are the kings of of the royal monarchy of David, the Davidic monarchy. Shenemar, Vayavo Melech David, Vayeshev Hashem. David came and sat before God. Vayomer, he said, Mi Anochi. So this all goes on to say, why was David allowed to? Because Rashi says, Shecholak la'makam kavod. Hashem gave him kavod lahar v'shemachos shlem, to show that his malchus is complete, that his malchus is perfect. So Hashem said that David Melech is allowed to sit there, and those of his descendants who take his place. But the Kohanim are not allowed to stand, Levim are allowed to stand, nobody's allowed to stand, to sit rather. The only ones who are allowed to sit, I said stand, the only ones allowed to sit are David Melech and his descendants. But nobody else, Kohanim and Levim, aren't allowed to sit there. So how do you say here, the Kohen stood up and accepted the Sefer Torah? He was sitting there. How could he sit there? The Gemara says, says, Be'ezras Nashim. When the Kohen read the Sefer Torah, he wasn't in the Azara, he was in the Ezras Nashim, which didn't have the same Kedusha. That's what Rav Chisda is going to say in a minute. Hachanavi Be'ezras Nashim, same Ezras Nashim. And here, the Rav Ransberg, his girsa is the Tanya, because Meisveh is like a kasha, that's what Rav Chisda says, or the Gemara said, sometimes the Gemara says, V'hei Chomer, where did Rav Chisda say that? Rav Chisda says it's Ezras Nashim, where did he say it? But his gear says the Tanur Rabbanan, Hechin Koreh, where's the Kohen got to read the Sefer Torah? Ba'azara. Tanakama says it was in the Azara. Rabbi Lezer Yaakov says no, Bahar Abayas, on the Temple Mount, not in the Azara itself. Shenemar, it says Vayikra Bo, he read it Lifnei Rechoba Lifnei Shar Melech, on the street before the Shar Abishvar Shar Hamayim, before the gate of the water gate. Watergate, right? Hashem Lifnei Shar, that's what it is, the Watergate, right? Lifnei Rechoba Lifnei Shar Hamayim. So the point is the second Tana says it was only on Harabayas, but the first Tana says Me'echen Korei Ba'azara. That's Mashma said in the Zara. Rav Chisda says the Bezos Nashim. When he says the Azara, it doesn't really mean the Azara proper, which has the Kedusha, which nobody's allowed to sit there unless they're from Malchei Beis David. But it means in the Ezras Nashim. The Ezras Nashim didn't have the Kedusha, just like the Shar Nikner, the gateway between the Ezras Nashim and the Azara also did not have the Kedusha. That's why the people who are Tomei, like the Mitzvah, etc., are allowed to stand there. But what does the Kohen Gadol read in the Sefer Torah? He reads the beginning Achrimos, like we read on in the morning of Yom Kippur, Achrimos, V'ach Ba'asor, and the Parsha of in Emor, which begins with Shor Kesef. For a minute, how could he skip? How could he skip from Achrimos to Emor? The Dagmanav you can skip when you're reading Nevi'im. And the Torah you don't skip in the Torah. Amar Ba'al Kasha. Like Moshe said yesterday, the Teimanim still have that custom of translating after you read the Chumash. So there's a translator there. So I'll tell you what it is. He says, yeah, you're not allowed to skip in the Torah, but he says it depends. You're not allowed to skip. In other words, you're allowed to skip a little bit so that there's no break between when the translator translates Psukim you just read. By the time he's finished, you're ready to read the next one. So if it's just moving a few columns, you're allowed to. By the time he finishes translating what you said before, you'll already be at the next spot. So since Emor is very close to Achrimos, it's okay. In other words, if the Torah would have finished already and you're skipping the Torah, you're rolling and rolling, that's improper. But if the Torah wouldn't have finished yet, and that's the case when since Emor is close to Achremos, by the time you finish, the Torah would have finished translating what you said in Achremos, you've already rolled to Emor, then it's okay. No, but that doesn't make sense. We learn about that. We said you're allowed to skip in Navi, not skip in the Torah. How much do you skip? How much can you skip in the Navi? In the Navi, you're allowed to skip how much? As long as the Torah hasn't finished translating what you said before. It's mashma. In the Navi, you're allowed to do that. Mashma in the Torah, you can't skip it all. Elam Rabbi, no, this is the idea. Lokash. In one inyan, if you're talking about the same topic, then you're allowed to. You're allowed to skip. In other words, this is we say you can't skip in the Torah at all, is if you're going from topic to topic. Because in the Torah we have halachas. And if you skip from topic to topic, people will be confused and they might have forgotten the first one, and that might have been a halacha, and that would lead to a takala because they don't follow the halachas properly because you mix them up by switching topics. There, we say you can't skip from one topic to another. You can't skip around. But if it's in one inyan, here it's one inyan. one topic. Why? We're talking, Achri Moses is talking about the avoda of Yom Kippur at the beginning, right? The Shtei Gorolos, etc. What the Kohen does. Kohen Gadol does that. And we're talking about the Asal Chash. We're talking about Yom Kippur, so it's one inyan. Kan bin Yanechad, kan b'shnei inyanim. If it's two different topics, then you can't. Tanya, and this is what we mean of this. So this is what Bryce here explains it better, because when we said in the Torah, you skip it all. That's from two different yanim, but in one yin you're allowed to. As we see in the Brysa, you're allowed to skip with one inyan, and another you can even skip in between two inyanim, because we're not dealing with halachas. The kan, and even so, whether you're skipping in one inyan in the Torah or two inyanim even in two inyanim in the Navi, as long as the Torgman hasn't finished translating the first thing that you said. Otherwise, that wouldn't be covered at Tzibur for there to be a break. People are waiting around. When people wait around, what do? They either smoke or they talk, right? And that's not covered at Tzibur. Right? Obviously, they're not smoking on Shabbos Yom Kippur. But the point is that actually, after a Torgman, that's a definite rule. So either way, you're never allowed to skip under any circumstances, whether it's Navi or Chumash or in the Torah. If there's going to be a break and the Torah will finish and you haven't gotten yet, you haven't rolled to the spot, you have to rub. But you can't skip from one Navi. You can't go from Yeshaya to Yecheskel, let's say. You're allowed to, because that's considered all like one big book. But you can't go backwards, right? You can't go backwards. You can skip around from one Navi to another Navi within Shnei Masr, because it's one book, but you can't go backwards in any case. We go to Torah, and then he rolls up the Sefer Torah, and he puts it in his bosom, he holds on to it, and he says, you know what? Yosir mimasha, because mimasha karisa, more than I've read before you from this is written in here. Why does he have to say the people should think something's missing in the Sefer Torah? So he says, notice he can't, there's not enough time to roll the Sefer Torah from Emor to Pinchas, therefore you can't do that. You can't do that. We'll see in a minute. So why don't you bring two Sefer Torah? We'll see. So he can't roll there, but he says, listen, the following section I'm going to read to you basically orally, because I'm not going to sit around and wait, but I'm telling you that it's written in the Sefer. There's a lot more written in here than I've read to you from the book, but the part I'm going to read from you orally is written in here too. It's just that I'm not going to take the time to roll the Sefer Torah. So, right. So first of all, he says there's a lot more written in here. I'm not. You shouldn't think anything is missing. I'm just rolling it up because that's more efficient right now. But there's a lot more written in here than I'm reading to you. And he says, it's not written in there, and there's something's written. He said, no, I'm telling you, it's written in here too. I'm just not going to wait to roll it. So again, the question is, why did he do that? We've already explained it. Really, he said it's not proper, but not proper to make the piece Sefer wait while you're rolling the Sefer. But why can't you? Why not? So the Gemara said here, but the Sefer, like, why don't you roll it? Why don't you roll the Sefer to Pinchas and read directly from the Sefer? We're at the first of the wide lines on Mem Aleph. The Fish ain't going Sefer Torah but Sibor. It's not proper to roll the Sefer and Sefer and make people wait while you're rolling. That's improper to do. So let's say so bring another Sefer. What do we do? Right? You bring Sefer Torah. Why don't you bring another Sefer Torah? People will think something is wrong, that the first Sefer is defective. If you bring out a second Sefer, people think something's wrong with the first one. Because you're going to make a Sefer. If you bring another Sefer, you got to make another bracha. And this is one, it's only one person, one Kohen Gadol is reading, so you have to make a second bracha. Are we worried about Pgam? Why do you say, if you bring a second Sefer, people think something's wrong with the first one? Right? Rosh Chodesh Tevis, he gives an example of Rosh Tevis. We know it happens even on a regular Rosh Chodesh Shabbos or any Yontif when you bring a second Sefer, right? But Rosh Chodesh Tevis, that's the case par excellence when you bring out three Svarim, if you have three Svarim. Rosh Chodesh Tevis Shechalios b'Shabbos, right? So it's what? It's also, it's Shabbos, it's Rosh Chodesh, and it's Hanukkah. Rosh Chodesh Tevis Shechalios b'Shabbos, maybe she brings three Sefer Torahs, V'korei Achas min Yom Shiyom, one you read whatever the parshas of that week. B'achas shel Rosh Chodesh, one Rosh Chodesh, right? B'achas shel Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh first, Torah b'Shana, Torah Rosh Chodesh is more often, and then you read Chanukah, right? So why do you say you never bring out a second sefer? Here you bring out even 3 svarim. You're not worried that people are going to think something is that the first one or the second one is defective. The answer is tlas agavi b'tlas sifri, like a begama. If 3 different people are reading it, that's when you bring out a second sefer or a third sefer, you call up somebody else. When 3 people are reading it, then people don't think of it as a gam. People don't think that there's a flaw in the first one or the second one. But if one person's reading and you put that sefer down and you take out another sefer, and it's the same person reading, this is the Kohen Gadol, people will think there's a flaw in there. Therefore, the best option is roll up the sefer Torah, announce that I'm reading now the rest Baal Peh, and you read that portion from Pinchas Baal Peh. Yeah.
If you have one Sefer Torah and then you roll it, and if you bring out all 3 of them at the same time, people won't think that there's a pagam because you brought out.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. If you say bring out,
if you bring out one
right,
at a time,
if you bring out 2 at the same time, that people still might think that. People still might think. For example, what's always a concern? That somebody is coming afterwards, right? Somebody who comes in later to shul. He wasn't there at the beginning, right? A lot of people come late to shul, and they see there's a Sefer Torah there on the side, or somebody's holding it or whatever, and all of a sudden you put this one down, and you start the other one. He doesn't know you brought them all 3, or maybe he'll think, even if he was there at the beginning, he might think that, oh, you brought them out as a backup, in case something's wrong with. Maybe you took out all the 2. Today we know that you bring out the second one for the Haftarah, but if you didn't know that, okay, you bring out 2 as a backup in case something's wrong with the first one. Then you bring out the second one, even if he was there, or he might not have been there when they took out all 3 Sefer Torah. And that's how. What do you know, Elias? No, Elias. The Kohen Gadol read the whole thing. Tan Rabbanim, Mavarchan al Torah. These are the brachas that you make. Marachal Shem brachas. San Rabbanim al Torah. Kederach Shem brachim basic nesses. Asher bracha bar Rabbanim. Asher nasim al Torah says. Al bar Valdav al Machilasam Kitikman. Like we have in the Machzor. Right, we have it say Modim Mechilas and we say that on Yom Kippur. Ala Mikdash B'fnei Atzman. Then there's another bracha of Mikdash by itself. Ala Kohanim B'fnei Atzman. Right, that's a separate bracha, a special bracha. We don't have that bracha today. Ala Mikdash, Ala Kohanim B'fnei Atzman, Ala Yisrael B'fnei Atzman, Ala Yerushalayim B'fnei Atzman. As I said in the Mishnah, it doesn't bring out Yerushalayim. Ashar Tefillah. Talk about Ashar Tefillah. What is Ashar Tefillah? What is it with the rest of the Tefillah? That's like where we say Shema Koleinu. China, it's supplication, arena. Song, bakasha, and requests. Sha'amcha Yisrael tzrichim li Yeshua or li Vasha. They need that your nation Israel needs a salvation. V'choseim b'shemet v'naf shemet tefillah. That's a bracha that he made shemet tefillah. Again, we don't do that today, but it's like our shemet tefillah we say in Shemoneh Esrei every day. Mikanda Eilach. After that, after the Kohen Gadol was finished, he did the avoda. He took out the Sefer Torah. He read from the Sefer Torah. He said this whole entire big Shemoneh Esrei. Everybody goes home. Maybe Sefer Torah, bring a Sefer Torah, mitoch beso, from his house. The Korban he reads, the Kol Kach Lama. Why? Why does everybody use it? Kedei laharos chazuso l'rabim, to show the beauty of the Torah to the people. And how were they able to do that? How were they able to bring the Sefer Torah to beso? Because he holds Einer but Sol Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, there's no problem carrying, or because Yerushalayim, the doors were closed and there was an Erev, so they were allowed to carry their Sefer Torah from their house to the Beis Hamikdash, and they all read from the Sefer Torah. All right, we'll pick me up tomorrow. Mr. Shem comes.